University. I'm a full-time lecturer. I teach honors composition and English 209 and English 316, which are hip hop related courses. So I am the hip hop scholar at A&T.
What made you want to use that, like in terms of hip hop, as your specific thing to teach kids?
And it just started out with my love and understanding of African American literature. So I approach hip hop from through a literary standpoint in terms of hip hop being an extension of African folk tales, slave narratives, the Harlem Renaissance, Black Arts movement, and how hip hop is connected with all that stuff. So my master's degree is in English and African American literature, and even as a graduate student, I wrote about hip hop stuff as much as I could in my classes. And once I had the opportunity to develop new classes, I did so. And I thought, what anything better than hip hop at an HBCU? Black art, black school, seemed like a slam dunk to me.
So, where are you originally from?
I am from Statesville, North Carolina, which is in the valley, the foothills in western North Carolina. Country boy.
So how were you raised? What was your life like living in Statesville?
I grew up in housing projects in Statesville, so I grew up poor in Western North Carolina, single parent, having had an older brother who's now deceased and a younger sister, and we had a prototypical lifestyle of being in rural America in the 70s and 80s, uh, and poor. Uh, Although at the time I didn't necessarily, I knew we didn't have money, but I didn't see myself as poor. We had, food, shelter, clothing. My mother was a working parent, and she was just working poor. And so, in Statesville, I had what I thought was a decent upbringing. I had an older brother that looked out for me. I had a father who was at least around, and I had family. I had love. I had, you know, a lot of things with the exception of resources. But I had school, so I always did well in school, and school became like the thing that I did. So I think that was that.
Growing up in that time period, we always hear about growing up in the 70s and the 80s and back in my day. So, like, as you grew up, what did that look like? I feel like, especially in those type of towns, it was different from the 60s to the 70s to the 80s as times grew on. So, as you grew up, what did that look like as your life progressed?
I think like a lot of black and brown people who grew up poor in the South, close proximity to whiteness, a whiteness that was based in white supremacy. I think as it is now, it was then. However, the '70s were a different time to where I think our country was becoming a little more progressive as it pertains to disenfranchised groups. And in my area, Brown versus Board of Education, although it happened, two generations before me in the '50s, uh, had a profound effect on my education. I've always gone to school with white kids, and my older brother, who was just a generation before me, did not have that experience throughout his primary education. So
Wow.
that coupled with sports, sports were big back then. Everybody that I knew played football, basketball, baseball, or wrestling, track, and baseball. Or I mean, there was no like AAU circuit wasn't as big as it is now, and so you didn't have these specialized kids athletically. I think also the times were different in that black people were just getting some semblance of a taste of middle life success, the idea of going to college and being able to advance oneself in socioeconomic status via education was something that my generation was perhaps the first to actually get a hold of that because we were the first generation in my area of the country in Western North Carolina that went to fully integrated schools from square one. So I think a lot of those things, and then you can throw in the South, and the South is the South, and the further you get away from urban centers,
Yeah.
the more southern things get. I think people had you had to interact in a physical space more than we do today. So you had you know, old auntie who was no kin to you in the neighborhood could discipline you just as easy as your mother could. So
Yeah.
once again, times were just
So as a being teenage, Turman, what was teenage you like when you was growing up?
oh man, wow. Uh,
You
once
got to hear
again,
some wild stories.
kids,
What's wild story?
well, well, kids just had a whole lot more freedom in terms of being in
Mm-hmm.
outdoor spaces. I can remember as a teenager leaving my house on a Saturday early in the morning on a bicycle and not coming home till 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and then being up in the neighborhood till 1, 2 in the morning, getting into various and sundry things. I think drugs
Mm-hmm.
were big back then. Just kind of the beginning of the cartel inspired multi-billion dollar
Mm-hmm.
drug culture that we've grown to just take as a part of life nowadays. It wasn't really like that back then. And so the dangers that you could face, even as somebody who grew up, in a rural projects, housing project situation. We didn't feel as fearful of losing our lives. I remember
Mm-hmm.
having, as you asked me about the teenage Turman, and so fights were like a big thing. Hip hop was just starting to become something
Mm-hmm.
important. I remember my first like real grasp of hip hop and just being attracted to the sound. Um, so it was a much freer time, I think, for young kids. We wasn't worried about uh, body structure and identity crises, and the idea that some teenager may be
Yeah.
depressed. I was growing up was, hey, get over yourself. Uh, so times were a lot more, I think, rigid. But also for teenage Bryon Turman, I had a hell of a time. I had a hell of a time being a teenager. Particularly growing up where I grew up and where I grew up and with the friends that I had around me. Um, but once again, I don't remember ever being fearful. I've been in some scary situations, but I don't ever remember being afraid. Um, Generally,
Gotcha.
if we had some a problem with another neighborhood, it was a fight it out, and at worst you might go home bloody.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember having my friends being killed and or shooting at folk and doing that kind of stuff when I was growing up. It was like I said, worse you might get hit with a bat or a knife or a razor blade,
Yeah.
which could all be fatal. But those fatalities were few and far between when I was growing up.
So from living in the South, because me from New Jersey, right? When it comes to hip hop, of course, New York music is really influential, even like Philly music.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's the same with us.
Right?
Most of Yeah, most of the hip hop then came from New York, and so like I think even now like my favorite MC of all time is Jay-Z. I mean, even though I was born and bred in the
Mm-hmm.
South, it's not T.I. or 8 Ball MJG or a lot of other cats that were rocking Southern MC Scarface or somebody like that. It was Jay-Z, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's because my first interest to hip hop was via New York, and because New York, the Bronx specifically, is the birthplace of the culture in terms of what became
Yeah.
hip hop. Um, we people of my generation, we got our hip hop from New York, and even though we rapped and had breakdancing crews and we did graffiti, most of it was all done in the spirit of New York. And I just think remember having folk from New York come down south for the summer and just absorbing dang near everything that they said, their walk, their talk, their what they were listening to, how they were dressing, and we tried to emulate that when they were gone to the best of our ability with the resources that we had available to us.
So,
Oh, Man, come on, man. 3-stripe Adidas sweatsuit, some snail toe tango. Don't mess around and have your a little doogie rope. It don't matter if it was fake or not. You were the absolute man. Shoot, I got my ear pierced when I was 15 years old, my left ear, and I straight up got it pierced because that's what you did. Me and my homeboy went half on some earrings, and we both got one ear pierced. That's how it happened. I remember coming home and trying to hide it from my mama, which I was successful for maybe a day and a half. And after that, she was like, "Well, what's in your ear?" And she's like, "I ain't gonna take it out now. It's already done." And so I think shoot, man, just doing what you saw other folk do, just like any other teenager.
Yeah.
You're influenced by your surroundings, and we didn't have cable, and obviously not the internet, so you had to be around somebody to kind of get an understanding of what was going on.
So of course during that time, you say that the crack epidemic and things going on. Did that ever affect your community? And if so, how?
Oh yeah, man. I think that as it did in a lot of other poor communities across the country, if not the world, absolutely decimated. It came right on the heels of Nixon's first war on drugs, which led to the first wave or second wave or third, depending on if you count on what happened during Reconstruction, and then obviously slavery would be the first wave of mass incarceration of African
Yeah.
people. When you look at what was happening with convict lease systems and sharecropping and those things, I think are all forms of mass incarceration. And if you look at what was happening in the late 70s, early 80s, when the federal government arrested primarily anybody that they considered radical, which included everybody from hippies to black nationalists to street level criminals. What it did in my neighborhood culturally, it took the hustling game, the drug game, the crime game. Used to be a grown man situation, and I remember in my neighborhood, the cats that sold drugs, they were much older, late 20s, 30s. They didn't allow us young cats to be around involved in that mix. One of the things that happened right alongside the crack cocaine epidemic was you had a whole wave of the OGs being arrested and taken off the streets, which left big problems in a lot of poor communities. There was a need in that there were still addicts that wanted to get high, and there was a lack of supply. And so young cats filled the need. And then you throw money in that, and so now you got cats that are 13, 14 years old who are the neighborhood drug dealers when before they would have been 28, 31, 32. And the violence just skyrocketed. You throw crack cocaine in that, which was a cheap high. Cocaine, when I was a really young cat, was a rich person's drug. Powdered cocaine, people sniffed cocaine, or maybe somebody might have freebased it, put it in a spoon, and lit it up for the purposes of injecting it. But crack cocaine just changed the whole game. Neighborhoods were decimated. Folk didn't go to work. Then you had high levels of unemployment, along with that, the death of manufacturing jobs. So that was the post-industrial uh, circumstances, coupled with increased crime, heavy police presence, the Reagan administration just funneled money away from social services and into the military and law enforcement. And so one of the things that I saw this affect my neighborhood, we used to have a community center where you could go and you could play bumper pool or ping pong or get a basketball. There was a basketball goal right outside the community center. And I distinctly remember when they took all of that stuff out, the federal government HUD, which runs housing projects in the country, they took out the ping pong tables, the bumper pool, the recreational stuff, and they moved in lawnmowers, and so that community center became like the facilities place. And so now there's young kids when before we get out of school, we go down to the community center, hang out. There was an adult there. You had to sign a little pledge about not fighting, not cursing. Well, after they took that away, now we get home from school and there's nothing else to do if we're not playing sports. We didn't have resources. There wasn't nobody taking no karate classes. So it was the streets. And because the local drug dealer was just a couple of years older than you, he didn't mind you hanging around. If you 13 and he's 16, he don't care about telling the 13-year-old to go somewhere else. And next thing you know, you're making little runs for him. You see him with money. It's capitalist society. You're like, if he can do it, I can do it. And there were just not a lot of outlets, not a lot of programs. And so I think you throw all this whole mix in here where manufacturing jobs in Western North Carolina we used to be big and still are in furniture but there were a whole lot of factories that were part of that making some furniture. Those factories closed. A lot of that work went then overseas. So you got people unemployed. You got young kids with nothing to do. You got crack cocaine. You got law enforcement that is rather lock folk up. Then you had the privatization of the prison industrial complex to where now it's sending somebody to prison makes money for the state and private individuals. And so you throw all those things in together in the 80s and you get an explosion of street crime, street gangs, drug use, crime, and at the same time you had the Cosby Show. So it was a really crazy time to be alive.
And so in that came, that is crazy. That is crazy.
Yeah,
But
yes.
what's
So
I
you
about to
look at
say?
on TV, you watching TV and you seeing these exemplary models of black exceptionalism, and you're looking around the neighborhood and you're like, and ain't no lawyer married to no doctor around here. Uh, so it was just a crazy time to be alive.
So as you transition into that, what made you, not stay in those things to go to school? Because you eventually went to college. So what made you not be on the streets with other people and you decided to go somewhere else? What made you do that?
Well, what allowed me to not get caught being on the streets? I mean, perhaps is a better question. Was my mama. My mama was look here, I don't play it mess kind of person, and because at the time, um, the neighborhood that I grew up in, even though it was a housing project, there was a community, so folk knew who your mama was. They knew how she got down, and like my friends knew that if they pulled a lick and I was around, that I was gonna have to tell it because my mama was gonna make me tell it. I was way more fearful of her than anything that they could do to me out in the streets. And so I think that was it. I also always did well in school and always enjoyed school. Even though I played football, basketball, and baseball and fashioned myself as an athlete, school, just being at school, taking classes, performing well on tests, was something. Even though my mama didn't go to school, she saw that as an outlet for the three of us to not ever. And her mantra was, "We're never gonna have another Turman in the projects." And
Oh,
so
that's right.
and I did well. Like I said, I did well in school, even in Statesville. And although at times I was the only black kid in a lot of my classes in school, with the exception of maybe one or two teachers, I never really felt like that was a problem. Even once again back in the '80s, in a place like Statesville, my favorite teacher is a white woman, Mrs. McConnell, and she was a Northerner, so I think she had a different kind of understanding. Had gone to college in North Carolina, just never left. Ended up teaching in Statesville, married, and so she still had, I think, a very progressive liberal mindset. Never mistreated me in class. I ended up having her for a lot of my classes in high school, and so I think she was a very academic wise nurturing figure for me. And once again, my mama was just not having it. Like I never missed a day. I missed one day of school, kindergarten through 12th grade. I missed one day of school. It was senior skip day, and I liked school, but I didn't like it like that. And let's be clear. There's a lot of days I would have loved to have missed, but my mama, I remember, man, like first grade going to school with a note pinned to my chest, like, hey, don't call me. I can't take calls at work. Punish Bryon however you want. And if I was sick, my mama couldn't take days off work because I was sick. So it's some castor oil, some Vicks Vapor Rub, some Vaseline, and get your ass to the bus stop. And so just always went to school, and I think I grew to like it. And so since I liked it, I did well. I used to already think that the difference between myself and my friends was they just didn't like school the way I did. I never thought I was like super smarter than anybody else. I just felt like these cats just don't like school like I do, and some of them, their mama ain't crazy like mine. So you know, and so I ran the streets, and there's some cats that hopefully still alive that could tell some stories about various and sundry things that I did and was privy to and was an accomplice thereof that was as dangerous as what some of the other cats. But I just never got caught. And if I did get caught, um, I didn't get caught with anything that was going to jeopardize my young life. So I think the community. By the time I got to high school, man, everybody in the community saw me as somebody who had an opportunity to get out of the projects vis-a-vis school. So they kind of kept me away from things. And like I said, they knew how my mama got down. And so if they were going to do some real serious stuff, they knew they couldn't have Bryon around because if we get caught, Bryon's going to snitch. And so, what was that?
It is. So, so when you North A&T is where you wanted to go.
In terms of college, yeah. Well, man, I always thought I was going to college, but since my mama um, wasn't college educated, nobody in my house like knew how to get there. It was kind of like I'm going to college. How? Like I didn't know you had to pay for admission, like the application. I didn't know that. And although I did really well in high school, none of the guidance counselors were telling me about this college, that college. And it just so happened that one of my best friends at the time was this white kid, and his mama, she straight up paid for the application to Campbell University. Showed me how to fill it out. Brought the FAFSA forms over to the house. Showed my mama how to fill them out, and I applied to Campbell University. I didn't go on no dang college tour. I had never stepped foot on Campbell's campus before my mom and daddy dropped me off. Um, Nobody knew anything about what it was going to take. We got the paperwork. This is your dorm room. This is when you report. And I went. Um, it was a horrible match. Uh, Being from Western North Carolina and poor, I was on some kind of like partial academic, partial minority grant scholarship type thing. And Campbell was just a horrible fit for me. It was too Christian, too stifling, too white, it was too everything for me. And so I went from being a very good student to being a horrible student quickly. Uh, I think my last year at Campbell, first and last year at Campbell, I think my GPA was under a 1.2. I remember when I transferred to A&T, um, I got a provisional acceptance. I distinctly remember having a conversation with the admissions counselor, and she looked at my transcript. She looked at my high school transcript, and she looked at my Campbell transcript, and she was like, "You'd have been better off coming straight here from high school, cause now we got to take these college grades, and it's no bueno." So yeah, now we're not going to be able to admit you. I remember crying. I mean, I cried right in her office and told her if I don't come to school here, I'm gonna have to go back to the projects in Statesville, and ain't no telling where I'm gonna be. And she said, "Well, she gave me some tissue. Yeah, I'm accept you on a provisional thing, which meant if my GPA dropped below, I can't even remember what it was. I think it was 2.5. I had to get 2.5 the first 2 semesters, the first year, or I was going to get kicked out. And I knew enough about GPAs to know that a 2.5 was under a B average, like a C plus. I was like, shoot, I'm good for a C plus. And decision I've made in my life. I remember when I transferred, my mama's only question was, "How you gonna pay for it?" And at the time, it was like less than $1,000 a year off campus.
Oh, Lord, what?
Like right at like almost $2,000 a year off campus. As long as you didn't stay off campus, as long as you didn't stay on campus. And so I was like, shoot, $1,000 a semester, I can hustle my way to that.
I can make that.
And so I told mom I would pay for it. I didn't know nothing about student loans or none of that stuff. So I got a job at UPS, worked, saved my money. I think I paid like $600 and then gave them the other $399 or whatever it was before December. And I did the same thing for the first couple of years I was at A&T and was able to just thug my way through it. But once again, I'm being in an environment. I remember coming to A&T and just seeing all these intelligent Black folk. I'm growing up where I grew up. I honestly believe that I was the smartest school-wise Black person, ever. I mean, it's one of those things I tell my students all the time. You can mess around and get special Negro status, and I grew up with special Negro status, particularly as it pertains to education. And I remember meeting somebody at A&T that was like a biochemical engineer, and I was like, Black folk do that? And I was like, man, this joker's an electrical engineer. This joker's a biology major. This joker's JOMC. This joker's business administration. I was like, man, this is where I need to be. And it has been, for now, I've been in Greensboro now since 1989. Graduated A&T in 94. I tell students all the time, like, I came to Greensboro in 89. I wasn't even a student for 8 months. I was just in Greensboro, living how I could live, just kicking it. I used to carry a backpack with no books in it, hang out on campus, space college girls. But eventually I was able to afford the tuition, got into school, and I've never looked back since then. I mean, once again, best decision I've ever made. I tell anybody A&T come to college, saved my life. I don't go to Campbell, I don't end up at A&T. So, as much as I didn't take advantage of all opportunities that I had at Campbell, I realized that if I didn't go there, I don't end up at A&T. And so, that's part of my journey that was a necessary and important part.
So I was there in 2020, but that's when people say make A&T ghetto again. What was lit early 90s A&T like?
Well, man, first of all, you got to recognize what A&T was not in I graduated in 94, so I can talk about from 89 to 94. It was not the largest HBCU in the country. First off, we had, I think, when I was a student, I think we might have had like 3,500 students, somewhere in between there, with less than 4,000. Now we got almost 13,000 students. When you were there, over 10, 11,000. So it's a much different situation. I think that's one of the things when people talk about, make A&T great again. Like, I can see people now in an airport, and I can see somebody in Atlanta Hartsfield Airport, one of the biggest airports in the country, and they will recognize me from math class 1992 at A&T because they were in my math class. Because if you went to A&T then, you kind of knew everybody, or at least you could recognize.
You're gonna say it.
Of that Aggie pride, that sense of us against the world, that sense of we're all in this together. I think that's one of the things that people are talking about. Secondly, A&T was not as academically driven as an institution in the late 80s and 90s. You had folk who were students at A&T in the 80s and 90s that, including myself. I mean, once again, I transferred with a 1.18 something. You're not transferring to A&T nowadays with a 1.8. Like, they're not even looking at your application
Oh,
codes.
nah.
And so since they were letting transfer students in there like that, like you could almost, if you graduated high school back in the 80s, you could
You
get
straight.
into A&T. Like, yeah, you was good. Like, wasn't nobody like average GPA 3.5 an incoming freshman. Nah, cause like it was a different thing. And then because we were so small, admissions counselors could do the type of stuff that they did for me. Like I'm well aware, and I can't remember the sister's name, but the sister that admitted me to A&T did so out of pure pity. There was nothing on paper that said I should be admitted at this illustrious university. But because I had cried in her office, she let me in.
Oh, Lord.
So back then, if say like if your daddy graduated at A&T and knew somebody that worked at A&T, you could get into A&T regardless of GPA. Like, yeah, if he knew enough people, he could pull some strings and get you admitted. There's no pulling strings nowadays.
No.
As a result of that, you had folk at college who a Tuesday night party was a great thing. Like if you talk about like A&T being a party school, we were partying hardy in the late 80s and 90s. Like all the other stuff I had talked about. You got the drugs, you got now hip hop, and that whole vibe of the culture, where stunting like your daddy, like you had cats coming through campus with the cherry red BMW M3s. You had the MPVs. You had all of that stuff was happening on campus. Campus was not as quarantined off as it is now. So if you wanted to ride through campus and you never went to A&T, but you had a nice car, you could ride through campus and bump your music. You could drink a 40 ounce on campus, with cats, and ain't nobody getting no charge. They might make you pour it out and throw the bottle away, but they ain't going through no charges. So the whole spirit of the campus was not as academically focused as it is now, from administrators to staff to students. Now, we're a lot more academically driven, and that shapes a lot of things that go on campus in terms of the culture. Students are a lot better prepared to do well at college. They know why they're here. They have a mission of a lot of us. We didn't know why we were in college. We were just there, and let's party. So, gym jams and, parties out on the strip, impromptu type situations jumped off way more than they do now. And you could do it on campus. And, we may have had 5 university police officers when I was a student, and everybody knew who they were. So what no speaking of, like, and if you were cool, like, shoot, when I was a student, man, I used to get off work at UPS, and we would climb through the window at Moore Gym and open the door, and we would hoop till we felt like not hooping, and security would ride through and straight watch us hoop. He wasn't kicking nobody out the gym. He wasn't, like, and we literally turned the lights on, I remember being in Moore Gym at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, waiting on the lights to come on because they had to warm up. And security wouldn't, everybody knew we were there. We were just hooping. Now that's breaking the enter. Like we used to rush the door at parties and not pay and just run up in there.
Good time.
Stuff that you do that stuff now. You're getting you a charge on campus now. You're getting kicked out of school, and it's going to be bad. So it was a much different university back then.
So as you went through A&T, right, and you say you started in '89 and you ended in 94, so you was there for 5 years?
Yeah, yeah. As a student, when I
Okay,
was
so,
there, as a student, I was there for 4 years, but I was there for a
got you.
year when I wasn't a student. I was just a Negro that was in Greensboro who hung out on campus for a year. I came to Greensboro
Yeah.
in '89.
So,
I
so
became a student in '90.
I got you. So, in those, so you go to Greensboro, you're there for 4 years. Was it like a smooth 4 years? Anything happened in that 4 years? Did you like go through anything that was crazy? Because for me, I was in
Oh,
engineering. I changed my major, that type of stuff.
yeah. Shoot. Well, academic wise, no. When I came to A&T, I knew that I was an English major. I didn't know what I wanted
Hmm.
to do with that, but that had everything to do with my experience. That is probably the second best thing that happened to me at Campbell. The first best thing was realizing I ain't had no business at that PWI like that. The
Hmm.
second best thing was I came to college as a biology major. I used to want to be a medical doctor. I don't like science and math. Like I don't know what the hell I was thinking.
Hmm.
I didn't recognize. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know you had to take all the damn calculus classes and chemistry. And if I would have known that, I never would have came to college as a biology major. So one of the things that Campbell taught me was that I'm not a STEM person. I'm a humanist. I need to carry my butt over there to English and humanities and history and that kind of stuff. I don't need to be messing around over there in that STEM business. So when I came to A&T, I knew I was an English major. Um, Maybe initially, if my memory serves me correctly, I may have thought about like becoming a lawyer or something like that, but I think that was a pretty fleeting idea. I never thought that I was going to be an educator. That was not one of the things that I wanted to do. But I knew I was an English major, so I had to choose a major. I chose English. So academically, I did. My problem was I never went to advisement sessions, and I mean I had something crazy. I think I had like over 170 hours
Hmm.
credit hours when I graduated because I was just taking classes. Like I would take. I was an English major, but I might have an African American literature class and 3 history classes because I was filling out my own schedule, just taking classes for the fun of it. And it wasn't until I got to the very end that I started like being like, well, I need to do to graduate. Like, shoot, dude, my senior year, I had to take a PE class. I had the last semester when I graduated from A&T, I had a racquetball class because I had never taken my half credit hour of PE.
I'm
So that's
dead.
just the type of stuff I was doing. But academically, I did well at A&T. I graduated with one of them cum laudes, summa cum,
Yeah.
magna cum. I can't remember which one it was, but I was an honors student. I graduated with honors badge or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, Culturally, socially, man, a lot of stuff happened. Man. Once again, the crack cocaine thing was running through the streets. A lot of my friends were arrested and incarcerated for very long stretches of time. Um, I remember I also had my own legal troubles surrounding being connected to that kind of work. Um, so socially, culturally, a lot of things happen. Academically, school wise, I never joined one club. Uh, I was a member of the history club. We used to have the Black History Club. I was a member of that, but I just went to meetings. I'm
But
more
you
like the
wasn't out here
president.
pledging. You wasn't trying to be a Q. You wasn't.
Nah, man. Nah, one, all that stuff took money. I paid once again. I paid for my tuition out of my pocket myself. So the idea that I would spend however much it was to, try to join a group of any kind was not happening, Captain. Um, then also, I was got big into hip hop and became one of those hip hop purist type dudes that was like, man, these fraternity cats, they ain't nothing but suckers. You know, I had that kind of mentality. If you wasn't down with hip hop back then, you was kind of square that I didn't mess with. I had started dabbling into 5% theology through hip hop. Met some cats that were 5%ers. They started sunning me up on the mathematics, and so I got into that, like heavy strong, dabbling in Rastafarianism for a little minute. Uh, Became a black nationalist. Found a love for black literature and black protest literature. I think most importantly was heavy big in Afrocentric hip hop at the time, and so all of those cultural things shaped me and kind of affected how I moved on campus. So shoot, I remember one time I messed around and came to class barefooted with with a cowrie shell bracelet around my ankle because you know I was an African prince uh, until one of my classmates was like, "Your toes ugly," and I went home and put some shoes on after my next class because you know, I was like, "She should have called my toes ugly." But so man, you know, started with the locks, started with the red, black, and green wristbands and paraphernalia. I was one of those dudes, African medallion, you know, Baja, red, black, and green Baja jackets. You know, I was Tribe Called Quest, Wu Tang Clan. You know, I was De La Soul, Poor Righteous Teacher, Dead Prez. I was on that kind of hip hop. So you know, even like I remember having a disdain for like Tupac and Biggie because they was that commercial hip hop stuff. You know, and
I
he was just
feel
doing it
you.
for the bread. You know, back then, you know, I was like, man, you know, that ain't real rap. So this conversation we always had about in hip hop about what's real rap and what's not. It didn't just start with the Migos. Like we've been having this conversation in the culture. But I think during that same time, though, I found a love and appreciation for Black culture, particularly hip hop turned me on to all kind of other stuff. I got a hold of reggae and calypso and jazz and blues. Hip hop was my entrance to a lot of those other of important Black cultural forms. Black literature. I went got a master's degree in African American literature as a result of that. So you know, culturally, socially, hip hop in the late '80s throughout then was the driving force for a lot of stuff that I was doing.
So you got your about this. Did you want to like? Did you want to like impart these wisdom other people? Were you just like, hey, I just want to teach? Like, what made you become a college?
Man, uh, necessity is the first answer. Um, Shoot, man, my first interest in the teaching was I was married. I was working at an insurance company at the time. It was my full time job, and I needed a part time job. So I got a part time job teaching English as a second language. Just 2 hours, Tuesday and Thursday, like 6 to 8. And I realized I like doing that. I liked interacting with. I had a bunch of French speaking Africans, Southeast Asians in my classes, and I just enjoyed interacting with them. And I'm teaching them basic, you know, ABC type stuff like I'm supposed to. I'm talking about fresh off the boat folk. Teaching them, you know, phonetic pronunciations of words and definitions of words and
Yeah,
how to make a sentence writing. And I was having so much fun doing that that I would spend 2, 3, 4, 5 hours of my regular job preparing for my part-time job. So once a lot of things got financially stable in the household, I was like, yo, I want to go back to school, get a graduate degree, and that way, if I don't want, I never wanted to teach like public school.
yeah,
I realized that was just going to be as stifling. One of the things I didn't like about the 9 to 5 situation at the insurance company was I had to wear a suit and tie, and I had to maintain all these
I can't even
mores
imagine you in
and
a suit and
customs.
tie, but yeah,
Yeah, it was not a good look. I mean, you know, shoot, I'm Man, I hate to tell you, I'm smoking blunts and drinking double deuces at lunch. I was I was on some other stuff because that corporate environment was just not me. Um, and then I remember
Yeah.
right after I had that conversation with my then wife, A&T called and was like, "Yo, you graduated with this GPA," and we had a graduate student who is not going to show up, but in order to maintain our accreditation, we need one more student, and
Hmm.
we'll give you the first year for the free. I was like, bet. And so I joined the master's program. I think I did my whole application and got accepted in the same day. It was like, woo woo. Like once again, whatever you call God, Allah, Jehovah, whatever you call that being, just put me in a place that I wanted to be in, perhaps sooner than I wanted to be. And then I found out about a charter school in Winston-Salem. I can't remember. I think I just saw an ad somewhere, and they needed a language arts, high school language arts teacher. And it said degree in English. Well, my undergraduate degree was in English. I went down there, talked to them. There was a school that was 99% black. Bunch of the students, all the students were on either expelled or suspended from Forsyth County School. All of them were poor. Many of them lived in public housing. I was like, shoot, these are the cats that I
Well,
grew up
yeah.
around. And so, they were paying, I want to say like $2,000 less than I was making at the insurance company. My ex-wife at the time had got a job that paid her a little bit more money, so we had some wiggle room in the household, and I needed to have time to work on my graduate classes. So everything just worked. I was driving back and forth to Winston for 3, 4 years while I earned my graduate degree, and at the same, I think I finished my graduate program the same year that the school ended up closing. So like stuff just worked. And right when I finished my graduate program, there was a professor in the English department that got sick. They couldn't take her classes, so they was like, "Yo, if you pick up these classes, we'll make sure that you got at least a year employment." I needed a job. I had a master's degree. I was at that, and I've been there since I became full time in 2002, and I've been there since then. I think that was like 2000, and I think it was right at 2000. So I was an adjunct part timer for 2 years, and then I got a full time job, and I've been in that space since then.
So for people who want to be a professor, right? What are some advice? What advice would you give somebody?
Um, First of all, there's some things that you need academically. You got to have at least a master's degree
Hmm.
in whatever the subject area that you want to teach in. So you can't have a master's degree in English and try to teach in the biology department. It don't work like that. Um, the other thing is um, have a love for the discipline. I
Mm.
think that's the thing that for me, I'm really interested in books and reading and writing. So because I have a personal interest in those things, it's easier for me to deal with these things in the classroom. I think depending on where you want to teach is important. Different schools have different social norms.
Hmm.
It's different. At A&T at Central than it is at North Carolina State than it is at East Carolina. So I think understanding the culture of whatever school you're interested in teaching at, um, having a love and appreciation for the discipline that you're going to be working in, and then understanding, unless you're a researcher, that then you're a teacher. So being interested in delivering the information in an acceptable and usable form to the students. Um, Teaching is communication. And anytime you communicate, you got to communicate to the specific audience and their needs. And I think that having an understanding of what students need and being interested in filling that need in whatever discipline or academic area that you want to teach in, I think all those things are important. And if you have those things, it's not like it was perhaps 2 generations previously, to where you should probably throw your name in the hat. There are a lot of outlets online now, like LinkedIn is a big time thing. I don't even check my LinkedIn page um, as frequently as I used to, but when I did, I would get all kind of job openings for English departments at schools all around the country. And then you can teach internationally now because of the electronics, the computer, and all this stuff like we're doing now. So I think being open minded is important. Having love and appreciation for the discipline, having the requisite skills and education to do it, and doing some research on the culture and community of the prospective school that you want to teach at.
And lastly, is what are the 5 elements of hip hop?
Well, it depends on who you ask. For me, it's going to start with the DJ. You're going to then go to the beat boy if somebody's playing music, somebody's dancing. The graffiti writer. You can't leave out the visual art and the MC, and then you get several others that are attached. Knowledge, I think is really important. And they have a knowledge and appreciation of the culture. Fashion has been something that's always been important in hip hop, and then style and attitude, a way of walk, a way of talk, or just a belief system, a way of behavior. For me, those elements are essential to hip hop music and culture, and having an understanding of that how all of them fit. One of the problems that I have with a lot of cats is now you young cats, y'all know the rapper, the MC, but the MC is just one of the essential elements of hip hop. He's now the most popular, or she, or they are the most popular now. But if you really say that I'm somebody that's a constituent member of hip hop music and culture, you got to recognize that the DJ, the graph writer, the break dancer, having knowledge, having an understanding of the style and attitude, behavior, mores, and values of the culture, and fashion. I think all these things are important nowadays, and so those would be my, I guess, 7 essential elements.
Right. Well, that's it. It was an amazing conversation. I learned so much about Coach. Is there anything else you want to say?
Hey, no, man. Appreciate your time here. Other than, man, it's always my pleasure to talk to you, folks. And for the audience, don't let D fool you here. Is a very highly accomplished young man. Proud to call myself a mentor, and at this point, man, friend. And I've always loved the brother. Beautiful soul. Man, I always appreciate talking to you, man. So you want to talk? You get me talking about Bryon Turman, and I can talk about Bryon Turman for the next 3 hours. So I appreciate the time and space, brother. I'm glad to have shared this moment with you, man. And make sure wherever y'all edit this thing up, and make me look pretty when you do it.
Yeah, I got you. I got the little beards
like up. Fabulous, greatest professor / educator / mentor / ever.